All right, well, thank you very much for coming back. We're getting set up here for our afternoon panel, What's the Key to Unlocking Mass Market Participation in Smart Homes? And I'd like to introduce the moderator, Morten Brimold, from CEO and founder of Accelerate, a smart home strategies firm in Denmark. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome to this panel debate on the topic, which is actually what is the key to unlock mass market participation in smart homes. And I think actually we need we should get our panel on stage here. And so please, guys, join us here. Yeah, it's anywhere, should be one. So we're actually doing this without slides. There were a few slides to just, make it easier for you guys to follow and get to know the panelists. But I'll make a brief introduction. We have Mr. Alexander Pippert here from E.ON. We have Olivier Cornier from Belgacom. We have Svetlana Grant, going this way, from GSMA in the UK. We have who's the next? Sorry, we have Colin Calder from Passive Systems, and Susan Farnell from RWE Npower, and Peter Crayford from France Telecom. To the right for you guys. I would just, as Bill just briefly mentioned, my name is Morten Brimold. I'm the moderator of this panel debate. I would like to invite you guys to join in with questions. Otherwise, I will try to ask some of them, but I hope we can get a two-way dialogue going. But personally, just as a very brief introduction, I'm working with strategy consultancy, very specialized industry specific smart home consultancy for utilities, but solution providers as well in this market. I have a background from solution providers, bigger companies like Schneider Electric and others, more known companies, and smaller solution providers. So I have 10-15 years of experience in this industry, and this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this moderation. So the idea was actually, but now let's try to see how it goes. But the idea would actually be to try to structure this debate a little bit. The key topic was what is the key to unlocking the mass market participation in smart homes. But before we maybe jump to that, let's say solution, try to answer that question, we should probably try to establish the problem first. Get a common frame of reference, I think, on what is a smart home and what is the problem in the smart home area. Otherwise, it might be a quite unstructured debate. So just very briefly, it would have been slightly easier with a few slides, but let me try to just briefly walk you through the definitions of smart homes as we talk about. As we talk about them, we see smart homes, just for the conceptual reference, as a very broad range of applications. So it's not only energy, it's not only security, it's all of it, and it's integrated. So think of smart homes as a very broad value proposition for consumers. Then we have the home energy management, or HEMS application, which is energy related and which is, let's say, the notion for utilities and energy retailers. But that's part of the smart home. That's one application inside the smart home. We also have securities, camera surveillance, home entertainment. And then the smart meter sits inside the HEMS, inside the home energy management application. I'm sorry to say, but I think I'm in line with some of the panelists here. It's just a component, right? So think of it as an upside down pyramid. We have the smart meter on top, very broad application scope. We have energy as an application inside the smart home scope, and we have a smart meter merely as a component of the energy application. So what I would like to do is maybe make an opening question to the panel, and and then I'll try to see if we can see this in two sections. One which is the problem, or the analysis of the smart home problem for the industry, and then afterwards answer the question, what is the key to unlocking mass market participation in smart homes? So if I ask, for instance, I can maybe start with Colin, if that's okay. What is the problem? You know, it's a very open, broad question, but what is the problem in smart homes as you see it?
Okay. Hopefully it works. Yes, it does. What is the problem? Well, I don't think consumers think of it that way. They don't have a problem. So, you know, we have to really think about this in the context of consumers living in their homes today, unaware that they've got a problem, unaware of what they should be doing if they should even get round to thinking they've got a problem. And governments are raising awareness. So in the UK, for instance, we have something called Green Deal, which is all about trying to encourage consumers to go out and make energy efficiency improvements to their homes, and you know, they're getting access to free money or free capital to do that. But then the next problem you have is, if you do get a consumer engaged with that issue, is what do? I'm being bombarded with information about, you know, subsidies on solar PV, subsidies on energy efficiency. I've got utilities telling me things about smart meters and in-home displays. You know, I'm sitting there as a consumer, ill-informed, unaware of what I should do. What is the right and best thing for me to invest my money in? So I think, you know, we're coming at this from the angle of saying people do make improvements to their homes. The UK market is worth £27 billion a year. So start with the home improvement market, think about how that exists and is already segmented, and then think about how you can insert your capability and advice and knowledge into that market to take people on a journey as and when they decide to invest in their properties.
Okay, so any other issues on that question, or maybe I can then just follow up and ask the question. You know, we've tried to engage. Sorry, Peter, you had.
It was just really to add on to that, really, just from clearly the customer need, which we've spoken a lot about, the business need, which is, you know, not to be misunderstood within all of this, because it's back to what you're saying, where am I going to make my money from? So it's the shift that they're going to have to make from this product-centric, you know, one-size-fits-all to some sort of service-based delivery, which only a couple of them can actually realistically offer today, and start that journey. And then what's the government's need? So, you know, at the end of the day, if you take this all the way through, and at the moment, you know, government earns a large amount of revenues from, you know, me refueling my car every week, then if I'm now plugging that into my home, how's that going to work? So clearly they're going to have to start taxing specific things there. And if it's again, I think it's interesting with the available supply, then what happens if I have to do some washing and drying and I'm outside now of the available supply? So how do I get taxed more because I've been inefficient and now I've planned my life? Or, you know, this shift that the customer is going to go through is truly scary. I mean, they get worried about whole data protection and, you know, is my Facebook page safe or whatever it might be. But it's nothing compared to the fact that, you know, I'm used to be able to switch on my TV, switching on a light or boiling a kettle. And this stuff is going to fundamentally change. And it's scary.
But do you basically think that... sorry, Susan? Okay. Because my question was basically just: do you think the industry is right in putting focus on the consumer and engagement, or should it be directed to regulation and government?
I think. Am I on? Yes. I think that the government can oil the wheels so that, for example, in the UK, the initiatives like the Green Deal or eco budgets and things, on the whole, they exclude some of the features that would give the government some of the energy savings it wants. Whereas I mean, if it included them in more of the schemes or more of the segments covered, that would help. I don't think the government should mandate smart home things, because I think innovation is key, and we'll get innovation from the 6 industries that are converging around this. I also think that consumers don't care that much about energy to start with, even though their bills are high, and that's the starting point, and Colin was sort of alluding to that. And I think that the fair market value, we've seen some research, the fair market value that consumers put on some of these propositions is substantially less than the loaded price if you properly loaded it in, and we were hearing that pretty much from E.ON. Don't expect to make large profit out of this as a B2C proposition, not if it's sold in a conventional way, which brings me to, you know, some of what Colin was talking about this morning. You need to find ways of getting it in by looking at budgets in other places, like some government budget, or like some or like some of the benefits you can get if you start to combine some of these things together. But that's innovative, and that looks like very different business models, and it looks probably like convergence between several industries happening, whether it's between energy services and core energy, or between telecoms and energy, or whatever.
Okay, so
if I can just add to that, again, we are talking about smart home in a much broader context, not just home energy management, although it's a very important piece, and of course in the audience there are a lot of utilities companies for whom it is the main piece, but actually smart home can be seen in a wide variety of different services and different ways to control things and objects in the home. Security, for example, is one of them, and I think it might be important to look at different customers and kind of look at their needs and find the way into home through those other products. For example, home security might be one of them, and then sell on and add things and elements, because smart home as a very ideal place with everything in it is a very difficult proposition. One of the companies, for example, we're demoing here is Alarm.com. They have over 1 million customers in the US. Very, very few of them buy a whole suite of services. So it's going to be pick and choose, and there needs to be an ability for the home users to get what is relevant. And then once they discover the whole experience, then they can get more, and you can upsell perhaps.
I'd like to echo that. We looked at but with a but. We looked at the US market and found that with the exception of 1 or 2 companies like Nest, who in a particular high-end niche have been successful, most of the companies selling some of the heat management type services or the electricity things haven't been that successful with them, and they found that they've been much more successful with security. So then we started to look a little bit at the UK security market to see whether we could do exactly as you're saying. Should the lead proposition in fact be security? But actually, and I'd be interested to know what the telcos think about that. But in the US, the penetration's about 21% before they started doing IP security, and the corresponding figure is only 7% in the UK. And quite a lot of people seem to think that just culturally, the security market is I mean, that the UK it just is not that paranoid about security here as they are in the US, and so when one looks, I mean, there aren't that many kind of potentially quite large connected home propositions, and it may well be that perhaps energy actually is the killer app, the killer entry into this, but it's not going to be at a fair market retail price for a single widget. If it is unlocked, it'll be through an innovative business model, I think. But very interested to know what you guys think about security too. I mean, yeah.
So I think the security market is one slice of a market which seems to resonate in some of the customer. I think the energy is also resonating to some of us. I think in our case it can also be about healthcare and remote connection of people for care purposes. I think one of the issues is that smart home is a very broad term that the consumer and that the customer can interpret and use in a very different ways. I think the industry has spent too much time on one vertical and then try to make it work, and then goes another vertical, try to make it work, when in reality there should be much more cooperation and really work together between the different industry sectors. I think now 85+% of the home are connected, and so we can bring potentially a lot of capabilities to those consumers through the telecommunication infrastructure. I think it remains to be understood how the electricity and energy sector, the equipment vendor in the home, and the telecom supplier and the security supplier are working together to basically provide a real value to the consumer. I think in many countries that I've been in, I've seen a lot of, of the sectors try to compete. So I'm the telecom guy, I'm going to try to do security. I'm the electricity guy, I'm going to try to do some telecom. And I think the last 10 years have shown that there is not viability in one application so far. And we should maybe, try to work differently and pick up two of those, work together and really partner and make that work. And that may be enough funded then for the consumer to make a difference. So that's at least what we try to do as a telecom operator. And we hope to find partners to make that happen.
I want to go back to a fundamental consumer issue here. And you probably can all relate to this. People do not like having tradespeople in their homes. And so one of the key issues you've got to address is if there's that resistance point, A, I don't want tradespeople in my home. B, how do I find a tradesperson I can trust? How can I find a reliable person who's going to come and do a good job for me and I'm going to have a good experience? Then you stop talking about smart home and you start thinking about, well, what do consumers do today around home improvements which requires a tradesperson to go in the home, and how can I then ride on the back of that in the full knowledge that I'm not having to get over that huge hurdle, that sort of blocking point. The second thing is Accenture did a very good report that basically said if you want to be successful in this market, you've got to do 4 things right. First of all, there's got to be a consumer proposition, which is, there was a cost benefit to me. And, as a company, we get 23% savings on energy use for heating and hot water. So tick in the box, we get a huge cost saving. The second thing is the consumer's got to feel they've done something socially good. So there's a little bit of greening in there. It's not a key buying requirement, but there is a good feeling about what you've done environmentally. The third thing is you've got to have a seamlessly good experience from the day you pick the phone up to order something to the day that it's installed and commissioned and operational in your home. That whole experience end to end has got to be absolutely perfect, because if it's not, you won't get the viral marketing you need to make this mass market. And the last thing is the resulting change in your home has got to give you some beneficial comfort factor. In other words, my home's a better place, it's a better place to live in. So you've got to get all those 4 things right in order to have a proposition that allows you to play in the market. And I think where we get a little frustrated is we see too many technology trials, or too many trials that completely ignore all these other massive resistance points that unless you find a way of overcoming them, you will not find a mass market. It doesn't exist because you've got that fundamental resistance point at the beginning. People don't want to have tradespeople in their home.
Just to add on that, I totally agree that, but what's interesting is once you can get over that first point, then the retention aspect of that, because the person's gone through the effort of having those people in the house, then you've got a much lower churn issue than if it's these individual itty-bitty things that go on as well. So absolutely right, but that end-to-end experience and sustaining that experience is fundamental to this. Plus you've got some historic issues. I was having a quick conversation with someone outside about it. With Economy 7, I lived in a rented house for a while that had Economy 7, which I don't think I saw 16 hours, probably had 2 hours of heat out of it. And that stuck in my brain. So even if you're telling me it can go for 3 days, I'm going to want somebody else's house that's had it for a year before I trust it to then make that commitment to do my house in it. So I think there's some lethargy issues and some historical issues that we've built up in consumers' minds that is going to be part of this journey that's going to go on. So that getting over the first chasm of it and then getting that seamless experience and sustaining that experience, it's a hell of a challenge.
There's
just as a reaction to this or to the conversation we just have, I think these are all big words, you know, customer engagement, you know, and retention. And I think in comparison to the conference we had last year here in Amsterdam, I'm still missing the perspective from the customer, the real benefit from having a connected service in its home. Where's the benefit of having that home energy management system? Why should I buy this from a customer point of view? And what I'm missing in our discussion here are people which are great in marketing, great in product development, you know, looking for the real sweet spot in these products, which are going to be sold. And I've seen actually in the last year no real product which have reached the mass market, or haven't you? So we have to question ourselves, do we have the right, do we discuss all that topic from the right angle? And I'm questioning this.
I just say, as a company, I don't want to keep promoting us. In 15 months, we've sold 23,000 systems into UK homes. So absolutely, this works.
Yeah, the question is if 23,000 is a mass market for you.
I think 23,000 sold systems is more than many other people have achieved.
Pricing bit will drive a lot of change here. And I shall go off this on that.
So I'm not so sure if we should expect a lot from the government in some way to do so. I think if there is no value proposition for the consumer, there's just no need. And if there is no need, there is no market, and so we are chasing something that does not exist. I think what strikes me in this trade show today is that you know, even if at the beginning people say, "Oh, I want to bring something to the consumer," very quickly they come with, "Oh, we're going to be adding this product, this gateway, this stuff here, this stuff there," and by the time, you know, they have not yet defined what is the application the consumer is going to use, they already put 5 new pieces of hardware in the house that has already, you know, a modem, a set-top box, a PC, 5 iPod, and 3 pads, and so it's just like, it's pretty strange that we have already a lot of intelligent equipments in the house which are already well connected, and we're trying to add more to do something more. You know, I think that in the last 20 years of internet development, the internet has shown that if you want to have a quick, fast market deployment, it is with simple application that can be transmitted in a viral way from one person to another. And once you have found that, then you can say, okay, now I'm going to enrich it with more accessories, more connection, and so forth. But I don't think we have yet, you know, this focus of trying to find the entry point on the application before trying to sell more hardware to the consumers. And I think it's a big limitation in this.
So just one comment from here, because I agree also in Alexander's point that, you know, we fail to ask the why. You know, why are we doing this, and why is a consumer failing for the 3rd decade in a row to see the benefit in smart homes? Doesn't mean we cannot create a market, but it's not there, not today. But just as what strikes me is just that you know, no one was asking for apps before we had a smartphone, right? So I think in the same way, no one will really demand security applications, energy applications before we have the infrastructure for the home. So the question is just coming back actually to the presentation Peter gave early on with Mr. Average, which was quite interesting to me, at least. I think, do you think utilities and telcos stay away from offering the infrastructure, for instance security, because Mr. Average is not demanding it? I mean, there might be a 20% segment out there who would demand it and start the journey towards smart homes. But how do you think, along the lines of Mr. Average is killing business? Do you think that's an issue? Or
well, what I can do is I can reference one of the stories from Sir Terry Leary from the presentation and from reading his book. Is that and the kind of the mixture of lots of things into one delivery in this is that the gluten-free market, in retailing was worth nothing. They'd looked at the silo of gluten-free, and every Sainsbury's, Tesco, they all looked at that and they said, no, we're not going to do it because it's not worth it, because it's just a small silo bit over here. And then Patricia, a lady, can't remember her surname, got a meeting in his diary, came in and met him, sat down, said, look, my son's gluten-free, it's £40 a week, I spend £100 a week in Tesco's, but I've got to go somewhere else. And the light bulb went on. He went, wait a minute, so if I look at the customer as a whole, as the whole share of wallet, then that's 40 quid coming on top of my £100. So now I'm not looking as a silo, I'm looking as a total. So whether that's security, health, or whatever, I mean, Orange has got all those same services, all in silos, all doing relatively well, from what I understand, whether it be mass market in their own rights, but there's something about this holistic view of the customer that then makes this stuff make sense, but only with the right drivers and behaviours and comfort and the things that Colin was just talking about earlier on. But it really is about that full view of the customer and understanding what they need and how that gets delivered.
But yeah, sorry, before you, Colin, that's true, but not for everyone, right? Not for the average consumer, but for the segment that would buy gluten-free, right?
So that was one example. Then if you read his book, he's got one for pretty well everything else. The Tesco club card that he did, I mean, that is for everybody. And that was following the customer over time from where they were, and apples were weighed and paid up as 43p and put in a basket, where suddenly the EPOS system was scanning it in, and he could now see customer over time, which is where the Tesco club card started and how he developed all of that stuff with dunnhumby and how they took that data down the supply chain. So a lot of what I'm doing is based on that model. If you can then take that data from the house and put it back down the supply chain and back to the product, back to the Panasonics, back to the other people, then they can start to use that to work out what they need, how to take stuff forward.
Can I say also that I think if you look at all the technology in your home today, it's about delivering content to you as an individual. And that's pretty easy because you just download it, you've got an app, you've got devices that will play back that information to you in the way you want it and when you want it. The issue we've got here about making a difference in the home is if you want to have real value, provide real value back to the consumer, it's about control. It's not about monitoring. It's not about dishing up lots of fancy graphs about how energy is being used. That is not a compelling consumer proposition in our view. It's about control. And here's the rub. If you want control, it normally means you've got to send an engineer into the home because you're playing around with 220 volts. And to me, this is where the heart of the issue is. There is no killer app that's going to solve that issue. And then I go back to, but if you look at, for instance, in the UK, 1 million boilers are replaced every year because boilers just have a life. 350,000 PV systems are being installed on roofs a year. Heat pumps will replace oil-fired boilers in the country. If you just look at these existing markets, which are still high volume in their own right, and you start to apply a proposition to that says, you know what, instead of buying this replacement boiler, which costs you £1,500 and that's it, you buy it with some smart controls, and the payback is that you'll save £400 a year as a result of the smart controls. You've got a completely different proposition for that boiler replacement. And that's how we've got into the market. And so the second piece of that then is you've got to take the customer on the journey. You've got to say, not only are we going to put this in with the boiler, we're going to monitor that for you for the rest of its life, and we're going to make sure it does condense. We're going to make sure it is fuel efficient. We're going to deal with issues and provide alarms and alerts when it doesn't. So there's a whole new way of approaching the market. And I think we have to go back and look at the fundamentals. If smart home is about control, then control inevitably means tradespeople going into the home. That opens up the whole can of worms about how do I do that across a country, protect my brand, how do I wrap a whole workflow management system around that to make sure all the touch points with the customer are exemplary. And that's what we do. That's what we focused on, is solving that enormous problem about how those touch points deliver a good experience every single time.
And I can just very briefly but completely agree with the whole, once you get a big system installed, like a PV system, for example, it's a perfect opportunity to sell the home energy management, for example, because as a percentage of the total cost of all of the panels and so on, I mean, we're talking about the cost sensitivities and so on, so yeah, people would think twice about adding £100 or €100 when they go to a retail shop. But when you are paying, I don't know, depending on the number of panels, anywhere from 6 to 15,000 in one go, that £100 is not that much actually from a consumer's viewpoint. And now, for example, having one system installed a year ago in our own house, at the moment there is no smart meter in our home, so we have to go and take the readings and email them to our utility. And we've got two monitors, one for how much we generate and one just clipped onto our regular traditional meter, how much we consume. Now, we are tech savvy. We could definitely do with a lot more of that, but we don't see that sort of offers are not there for us to take. But it would, it's just thinking through this sort of opportunities. Just one example. There may be many more, as Colin mentioned.
That kind of approach also plays to the trust agenda, because trust is utilities in the UK are rated worse than banks. We're bottom of the pile. It's depressing. and frankly, if the utility is sitting there trying to sell the consumer, a £100 to £200 proposition, which requires us to get the data and see even more about what they're doing with their lives, when we can't even be trusted to give them the right bills today before smart meters are there, then that in itself is a barrier. Whereas when they're actually buying something else and they're in the mentality of they're buying their new boiler because they've just been in great discomfort, or they're buying PV to generate revenue, and whoever's made them that sale has gained enough of their trust to actually succeed in making that sale, and is then saying, and your PV will be X% more efficient if you take this, or your boiler will actually cost you less if you take this at the same time, then you're actually accidentally, if you like, addressing some of the or reducing some of the trust barrier at the same time.
Okay, we have a question from the floor, Rico.
Two questions two topics that typically come up when we talk about this killer application. Sorry, Rico Winter from Sigma Designs. Two topics that typically come up when we talk about this search for the killer app. Is on one side the demand side management that hasn't been brought up. Thank you for that, because that's usually a dead duck in my opinion. The other one though is the impact that tying additional services to your existing services will have on the churn. And again, coming back to your silo thinking, very often if you look at the business model for doing the deployment, then to pull on Alexander's comment earlier, your revenue will probably not cover your marketing cost right now, where the market still needs to be educated. But if you then cut down the silos and say, well, how much is the marketing department doing right now every month to regain customers that left us, and funnel that marketing money into deploying services that will reduce churn? What does the panel think of that way of looking at the business model?
The churn minus the lost kilowatt hours still doesn't cover the cost.
We've had lots of conversations on that.
Sorry, go on.
No, so as a telecom operator, churn has been always a very big concern. We have to work on it. But justifying a new market because we want to avoid or limit churn is not, in my experience, the way enough to motivate people to do something. I think that before taking care of a churn, if home and smart home is a market, it's because there is a need for it, and that the solutions that are being brought are efficient for the consumer. What strikes me with the previous example, if I may, is that in the example of the boiler, today, if you look at the boiler and how it can be really well leveraging internet and smart home type of technology, you can see that it is usually not the result of a good cooperation between a telecom sector and the boiler sector. The same is true for if you have automatic shutter and domotic system in your house. They are not usually very well thought through in terms of good cooperation between the telecom industry, the internet industry, and the domotic industry. And I think it's the major issue. I've been experiencing myself, very recently with a new heating system and a new domotic system, and it's nice and good looking on a standalone basis. It's very expensive, but at the end of the day, it's not having the beginning of the intuitive aspect and the good things of the internet that I have on a smartphone or on a tablet or on a PC. And that's what I think should be worked on to solve this problem.
The churn is already included in all of our business cases. Otherwise, it would be impossible. On the other side, I have to say, if you only look at it from a churn perspective, I have to say that there are other retention measures which are more easy for us to deploy in our processes, because I have to say that a smart home system is an electronic article at the end of the day you have to deliver to a customer, including service, receiving wrong systems back, doing all the payment. These are not the processes we have from a utility perspective. So on the other side, I hope that from the demand side management, actually, there will be other possibilities to gain some money in order to subsidize the hardware, give it for free. So therefore, I don't understand why you see the demand side management as a dark angle. I know it depends a lot on the spread of the tariffs and on the number of machines you can connect, on the ability to sell. But I think that the markets in the energy sector will change in future and will allow us to sell flexibility also from smaller homes.
So what
I can just put onto that. Again, this for me is business case and value chain, and then put leadership around the outside of it, and so there becomes your problem. So O2 for 10 years, every single key shift they've made on their strategy to when they did where new existing customers got the same deal as a new customer. That was about 5 years ago, and now a couple of years ago they then went to existing customers got a better deal than new customers. Every time they did that business case, it did make sense, but they still did it because that's what the leadership said was the right thing to do. It was still big arguments, still all the numbers in the wrong columns, and it didn't make any sense, but they've got the lowest churn in the industry. So there's that thing saying, this is the right thing to do as the business, it's the right thing by the customer, we're going to go down this road, and it will prove over time it's the right thing, until you bring in the sorts of KPIs that I was talking about. Then you can move from this business case to a customer case. And that's often what kills, and I'm impressed that you have got churn into your models, because I've not seen any believable churn information in a lot of business cases, because it's cannibalized. They're all over the place. So, so for me, that's the main thing. This is about leadership. It's about, that's a real differentiator in utilities. Who's going to be that CEO and the C-level people that go, right, this is our ambition, this is where we're going, and we're all going to go down this road together, and then bring in the attributes we've just been talking about, which is that durational customer view, consistent, sustaining experience, and make sure we engage with that customer over time around a holistic group of things.
Can I just add a comment to that? I think in the UK market we have the big six, and it's no secret that British Gas is committed to becoming a services business. I think the number I've heard is 50% of revenue from services within 5 years. And you need that CEO leadership where at the board level, the decision's made to move the business, and you'll take losses along the way in order to get to where you want to be. And I think, for as long as you go on looking at the existing business model and saying, doing the right thing for the consumer isn't good for the balance sheet, you're falling into the trap of the paradigm shift overtaking you when it happens. And too many telecos did that back in the early 90s, and that they really did get caught out in the late 90s.
So just one question from here, actually following up also on Rico's question. So if we believe that we're in the middle of a paradigm shift or a digital revolution or whatever we call it, then we should also expect the industry to be disrupted, right? So personally, I'm a little bit surprised that you don't see the churn, the retention potentially coming from other devices, other applications like security. We talked about it, home entertainment. So how do you see new entrants into this game if the industry is going to be disrupted? and we can expect Google, Microsoft, Apple, the other players with much more customer or consumer appeal in their devices and value propositions. Don't you think they'll take away, you can easily imagine broadband providers selling you electricity if you're a utility, for instance? Or how do you see this?
I see it very relaxed, but because you can't make a lot of money with commodity sales.
But you can sell services on top of commodities, I suppose.
Selling services is not about a commodity business. Believe me, our energy efficiency service providers are selling our product on a value proposition basis, and the margin they're making is unbelievable because of the way in which it's wrapped up. And you're absolutely right. Putting our stuff in with PV, it's 2% of the purchase price. Consumers don't even look at what they're paying for or the cost of that or the margin that's in it. Similarly, when you're replacing a boiler and you put some smart controls alongside it, the consumer is not focused on what the margin is on the product. So this is about value pricing and being smart.
And I agree. I think often we mix up the conversations about where the new entrants might come from. I think if you look at where other industries make profit, and then you compare that with the profit margins on core energy, you can argue that quite a few of those industries won't enter the core energy. That doesn't mean that if they had the data, they wouldn't enter price switching. Some of them already own price engines themselves. Google owns a price engine. Imagine it got all the data it needed out of the smart meter easily with some consent because it's already got a hub in the house. Then how much easier is price switching because it's already got the consent to make the new offers. And then the energy services. I mean, if you're British Gas and you do have a 50% of revenue target from energy services, then there's other players who could get some of the equipment into the house on a different business model and use the data from that to upsell the energy services more successfully. So then that does represent a threat.
Just to add to that, I think this is, and I saw a presentation from Google where they have something like a 100-year business plan, which I think is amazing in its own right. Lucky if we can see the end past our nose. But for me, this is all about the data. This is all about the data. The hardware, all of these other conversations we've had are just side conversations. Once you start to understand energy, put water into it, your whole impact on your household, the people in it, once you get the data for that, then you've got something really, really compelling. But then your whole thought process, the KPIs that run your business, the leadership, it has to be a different environment. And that's probably why you're probably going to get more third-party value-added service type people coming into this space because they're smart. There's a company I met recently who's kind of B2B, but they do a lot of nice value-add things that the telcos don't or won't do themselves because they don't. Oh, it's a bit of a pain in the backside doing that. Let them do it. But they then have this ongoing relationship and they create that engagement between those two parties while using this core service underneath it. So for me, data is going to be king out of all of this stuff. It's always going to be data.
But it's not going to engage the consumer, right? So if you take a backseat, if utilities or telcos, or let's say utilities for ease of reference, take a backseat in owning the data as opposed to new entrants entering the market. I mean, so you may own very valuable and rich energy data, but it's a commodity.
It's then there's a trust piece that comes into this as well. There's a new initiative coming, or not fairly new initiative in the UK called My Data, which is all about basically the consumer becoming king of their data and how that works. Now there's a number of challenges around that, but if you deliver, if you see the presentation of how they're talking about it, this initiative will change utilities, telcos, banks, insurance companies, because the customer will then truly be king because of the data and how it works and the power of that group of those individuals. So I just think it's, that if you don't engage, if you don't have the leadership to take this journey and this step and do that sort of move that, like the British Gas people are talking about, then you're just going to get left behind and you just have to go on this journey. There's just no other conversation.
Can I also add a comment? If you look at, let's say, mobile industry 10, 15 years ago, right, the market was liberalized, there were new entrants, then the market was further liberalized, there were MVNOs, and of course it was a competitive threat to the established operators. But ultimately, what happened is with many MVNOs, they have basically created their little niches, or big niches, as the case might be with some of the really successful ones. But the point is that when the market was opened, it was much smaller, and opening it up basically made it possible to have whatever 90% of the population with a phone. And if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have had all of the new price plans, new models of this and that. You have to if you limit the market to a few people, very clever companies that can deliver very good products, but if you limit your market, then you limit your market. So I don't think really entering third parties are necessarily a massive threat to the existing utilities. I think they're more of a way to create new opportunities for ultimately the entire industry.
Okay. So maybe, to just continue the discussion, unless we have other questions.
Sorry, just one more point, and then a question. One just interesting fact for utility guys here and ladies, if they're not aware of it. So just talking about core services, and they're all, whether it's a telco that's a dumb pipe or a utility that's just supplying gas or whatever it is, then there's some lovely research that was done. So Virgin Mobile is run on the T-Mobile network, and they had the JD Power scores, which is basically where they came back where Virgin customers scored the network higher than T-Mobile customers. Exactly the same network, but because the experience and the brand was this aspiration, I want to be part of it, and the experience was better, you got a better score out with exact. Create that more valuable brand and that true end-to-end proposition experience, and that's where with only data really can, in this sort of market, only data can help you really do that. And probably this chap down here.
Thank you, John Eagleton from ADI. Listen to the discussion with interest, and I think particularly the piece where a couple of people mentioned adding in additional types of services such as security and health. Very different types of consumer propositions, and then going back to, I think as Peter was saying about how you track the quality of the customer experience. Difficult to do with something like buying a mobile phone and checking you get a voice communication. How on earth do you do that with these complex heterogeneous experiences across multiple sectors where you're combining security, health, energy management? Just wonder what the panel's view was on that.
Just what I think I heard the question before the sounds there. I think that there's a bit here. I mean, part of the delivery I do, actually that reporting environment I presented earlier on is a zero requirements delivery. So that I don't go to the business and say, what do you want in this report? Because they won't tell you, because they don't know. So because they'll tell you what they did today and yesterday. So what this is all about is looking for the right bit of key bits of data that you need to track over time. And actually there's a lot, I think there's, as we have in mobile, as I said, where you buy in store, who you spoke to, how long, all of these sorts of things, which call centre you phoned, who spoke to, who transferred. We're looking at 60 KPIs per customer per day, rolled into 3, rolled into 1. And I reckon the data exists within these sorts of environments, then to that fridge, that car, that was doing this and this, tracking that back. Even to the extent that, who was plugging that in, who was switching it off, who was watching that TV, who was doing, you put security monitoring within all of this, and then you can start to do all of those things. But what is the ambition of the customer, the business, and the government? And it's how that gets balanced and how you stay trustworthy and independent in the middle of all of that. Because once you've got that sort of data, it's very easy to start to do naughty things with it. So it's about that independence. That's where my data, I think, starts to get quite interesting.
Okay, we have another question down in the back.
Yeah, my name is Harry Wildeboer. I'm representing Steam. I'd like to elaborate a little bit on this my data notion. If we all agree that in the end of the day the customers own their own data, and if you imagine that one day a energy service provider, maybe British Gas, maybe some other smart service provider, steps up and offers as a service to have the customer's data work for the customer, providing best solutions, best offers when it comes to energy solutions, energy services, energy whatsoever to that customer. From that perspective, I can easily imagine that many customers could easily switch away from their current retailer relationship and be completely happy with this type of relationship they would have with that type of energy service provider. And when I think about that, I'm a little bit wondered by the relaxed attitude of energy retailers thinking about that.
I'll have a go at that. I think that this is a very fundamental issue as to, first of all, how consumers perceive this. And I think we've seen smart meter rollout programs in certain parts of the world where the consumers perceived smart meters as big brother, you know, looking over their shoulder and taking control of their homes. And as a result, there was a very, very negative impact in terms of those programs. On the flip side, if you look at something like Google, you know, I use Google Mail, and I'm sure I'm not the only person in this room who uses Google Mail. You know, I opt into the Google Mail service, and I know when I opt into that service, they're going to scan my emails in order to refine my searches, in order to give me a better Google experience. You know, but I'm okay with that because it was my data, and I opted into the service, and I understood what the deal was. So I think at the heart of this, if you start from the premise that it's the customer's data, they own it, it's theirs, and they opt into services on a voluntary basis, and if you give an exemplary service back, you know, you stay with that service provider. And sometimes, you know, if I wanted to get off Google Mail, you know, it's an awful lot of hassle. I've got to tell all my friends to change my email address. So this shouldn't be seen as an impediment. It should be seen as a huge opportunity. And I would also make one other point, because I'm sure many of you know it, but there was a paper issued by the data protection body within the European Union. And that has said that no utility may have more than 1 meter reading a month as a legal right. After anything else you want after that, down to a maximum of half-hourly meter readings, there must be a consumer proposition with the consumer opting into giving you that greater level of data access. And I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but you know, these are fundamental roadblocks and issues that every utility's got to address. And I think the sooner we say, you know, the consumer is king, give them a real value proposition and let them be in control of their data, you know, we'll move this debate on. We will move the market on.
Maybe just a comment, we are not relaxed at all about competition. We are losing customers every day as an incumbent, of course. So my message was not about I'm relaxed, but I'm relaxed about new competitors, because at least I can say for Germany, every day 700 competitors are fighting among. But what we observe in the commodity market is that still the churn rate is very low. It's 10% almost, right? It has been risen slowly, but it has never achieved so far the churn rates which we see in the mobile market. So the conclusion for me is that energy itself, thanks God, for us as a utility, is not so, you know, the most important topic to think about every day. That could mean for a smart home proposition that, you know, the question is how to engage the customer within this and how to retain it with that proposition, and how is that product compared to other retention measures if you really look at it from a pure retention. But we are not relaxed at all, we are very nervous.
What I think here is interesting is that we have a dilemma of, on one side, we're trying to evolve existing business model and existing businesses. You know, we're working on churn, on retention, but in the purpose of evolving our existing business. At the same time, we're saying we want a mass market adoption of new services. But if we really want to do mass market adoption for new services, we need to enable new application. We need to allow the consumer to create and to find and to use this or that new environment, new application. It's not about us building, you know, the new mechanism to store more data and give partially the data we want to the consumer. It's about enabling the consumer to build up his own data with his own application. And I think so far the industry has not been doing that too much. I think if you take the mobile industry, for instance, you know, a big revolution came in when Apple gave, you know, an open world to multiple applications. Then suddenly it exploded. I think in the smart home environment it's the same. I think the different players of the industry should work in order to enable multiple applications in an open way so that people can really develop their own views of what should be done. And I believe that if we as industry sector don't do that, you know, the Google of this world are going to enable it one way or another above the infrastructure that is being put in place right now. And at that time, it would be, again, you know, there's still the value of the application and of the interaction with the consumer.
To pick up on Colin's point, Google will never, at the moment, until they buy something else, they will never be able to do the service element. So they'll only ever do the reporting piece, which, as we talked about earlier, it doesn't make really any change. So, but I think going back to the My Data bit, which I think is a fascinating, proper paradigm bit that will kick in once that really gets there. But the fundamental issue is the trust aspect in the middle of that. Is that has to, it's about the integrated nature of that and how it brings that whole piece together. And a lovely story was from Warren Buckley, who's the MD of customer service at BT, where he went out to as a trial, asking customers, once they'd called in, could I have your Facebook page, could I have your Twitter account? And they read out the T's and C's that went with it, and he got 7% or something. They said, right, ask again, but I'm not going to use it for sales. Got over 70% response rate. So it's this trust aspect with the data as a fundamental disconnect of trust with all of our brands at this operational service level. And that's why this is the bit that we're not set up properly for exceptions management, how we look after our customer. You know, all of the KPIs are wrong to do all of this stuff at the moment. So we need to look after customers properly first, and then we can start to then add on these services on top of it and make a good job of it.
But can we just remember one thing? The value proposition for consumers is not about monitoring data. You know, am I really going to get excited about knowing how much energy my fridge uses, or my deep freeze, or my, you know, cooker? It's about control. It's about changing the way in which your home operates to give you a better lifestyle at a more affordable price and greater comfort. Now that requires you to re-engineer your home. If you want control, you've got to have a different fridge. You've got to have a different set of controls running your boiler or your PV system or whatever in your home is using energy. And here I come back to the core issue. Is how do you get that type of equipment into the home as a service? Because it will happen over time, but it will only happen when organizations decide they're going to step up and start to introduce that change into homes as an exemplary experience and build up then the control capability for the consumer that has the real value, but at the same time gives you the data that you so much want in order to, you know, sell future propositions.
So, but just basically one question, you know, coming back to also what Alexander said early on, you know, we have had home control systems for many years, so can we really say this is what consumers ultimately want? So I don't know, any one of you, or, yeah, you Colin, you know, is this what the consumer in your experience ultimately wants? Control of his home?
Consumers want the home just to run and to give them a good experience at home, so that, you know, all you want to do is get home and have a good experience. You don't want to be involved in, you know, being the energy manager. You don't want to be involved in having to do all that stuff for you. So if I look at research we did some 3 years ago, we interviewed over 2,000 consumers, and we asked them, you know, how they got on with their existing heating controls. 47% said they've no idea how their heating controls worked. 66% of 18 to 24-year-olds said they've no idea how the heating controls work. And you know, I had to say I thought the younger generation would at least know how to use the controls. They don't. And you know, this is where you are. You are at a starting point where people are living in homes, probably with a fair amount of discomfort at times, because maybe they're using thermostatic controls which are pretty inefficient in terms of the range at which they react. They're probably doing a lot of manual control. In the UK, it's normally I turn it on in October and I turn it off in April. And so when you come along with a new way of doing this, and it's all managed around occupancy, and you put 23% of the money back in their pocket, what do we find? Well, we get 5 interactions a week on average. We measure every single human interaction with our system because that's what we can do. We can ensure those systems every day are doing what the consumer wants, what's good for their wallet. So we're absolutely their champion. And the evidence we've got is, yes, they engage and they love it. And the bit they really like is they can just set their home to whatever they want when they're away because it's on an iPhone, it's on an Android phone. So this is all about putting control in your wallet, in your pocket, anywhere, anytime. And ultimately, it's not about managing individual pieces of equipment. It's getting your home to run in the way that you want it to run against your budget. So our view is, ultimately, this is cost versus comfort. It's not even about temperature. It's just cost versus comfort. And my parallel is, if you go and buy an airline ticket today online and you're cash strapped, you might make 2 hops to get to your destination because it's half the price of taking another airline on a single hop. And you know, so you buy an air ticket on cost versus convenience. And whereas we're saying in a home, you really do it cost versus comfort. And that's all you've got to deliver at the end of the day. And it's very simple, but extremely difficult to achieve.
Well, let's say my belief is that few customers will buy systems and connect different devices in the home, like door and window contacts, heating, and plugs and whatsoever, being placed on a gateway. That system costs initially maybe $199, and then we expect the customer that everything is connected. I'm following a second belief now. I think the smart home gets smart by buying a new machine, by buying a new television, and customers, I think, will continue to buy televisions because they want to have a big TV with really good brightness, and if that TV is also connected to the internet, it's okay, and they will experience this, and then they will start about enjoying it. And then when they're buying a new refrigerator, they might look for a refrigerator which can also be connected to the internet if there's a functionality behind. And then maybe that journey stops for that customer. So this is a belief I'm thinking through currently, whether you know, the smart functionality comes with new machines in the home and not with like systems. You're trying to push to customers heavy marketing costs. So then we have to talk to LG, Samsung, and Sony what their views are about this and where they are here in our panel, right? So the question is, who's rolling up the game here at the end of the day?
I think part of the issue is that there are some particular applications today that deliver a good, you know, basically more comfort and lower cost, but that the consumer doesn't necessarily accept. I mean, okay, there are certain circumstances, like when they're buying boilers, whatever, where they may be up for paying the whole price, but the mass market isn't yet ready to buy these things at the correct price. And the same with the fridge, the extra fridge, you know, the fridge controls and everything else. But there's people in all of those value chains who have something to gain. I mean, the white goods vendors have something to gain from remote diagnostics and the prediction, the ability to predict when a machine's going to fail and actually offer to repair it beforehand, so that when the consumer comes to replace it, they don't take a cheap Chinese fridge instead, and they're loyal to the brand. So each one of these value chains has a set of business drivers within its own value chain, and to the extent that in the future we're able to combine through partnerships and through ecosystems arriving on some of the platforms, we're actually able to combine some of the benefits potential. Then some of these things will come together. But as I understand it, not many of those value chains can't get at the benefits they want on a self-contained business case in their own value chain alone, and that's part of the issue and the challenge.
Absolutely, completely with you on that. I think, and we should, all of us in our sector, realize that. And so, if I am in the telecom sector, I should not try to reinvent what I do in electricity or in security. I should basically ask the security or the electricity or the other sector, what can I do to enable you to basically transform your business? And I think it's essential, as opposed to you know, I'm the security company, I want to provide security, so the first thing I do is bringing 5 new hardware equipments to basically connect whatever in the telecom service. So leveraging the existing TV, the existing mobile phone, the existing PC, the existing screen to interact with the consumer, and using that telecom infrastructure to basically connect the electricity application, to connect the security application or the healthcare application. And I think if we were to do that, we could have partial profitability basically adding up and making the whole case viable.
Okay, so maybe can I just have one question round more, then we'll finish off. So I'm just prompted now to ask. So where in the value chain do you see this key driver, right? Because as Alexander says, we'll replace our refrigerator or our washing machine, and then it gets enabled onto the smart home. But no business case. No company can live with a business case where we're waiting for these appliances and products to be replaced, basically. So do you see where in the value chain do you see someone driving this smart home adoption or mass market adoption? Do we need anyone better positioned than others, or do we need to wait for connectivity in devices and things to be enabled?
Well, I think we have a lot of connectivity in the devices, but that a device can be connected to something is not enough for a customer. There must be a functionality that the device can be connected. Think about a refrigerator. If you can connect the refrigerator to the internet, okay, but what should I do with it?
But if it was,
I agree, and I think it depends on the on what things we're talking about. Sorry, the electricity. I mean, the case for making white goods more controllable is a long way off being particularly attractive to anybody. I mean, you save peanuts. Yeah, I agree. If the government continues to load tax onto electricity and electricity prices continue to go through the roof, then there might be a point at which that turns around and the price signals might be big enough, but they're not going to be there for quite a while. Heat's different because the opportunity to save the customer money on the heat bill is very different, and then some of the other markets, they appeal to different emotional drivers like home security, but there's a question as to whether you can unlock enough of a cultural concern about security to be able to go after that. And assisted living and health, there are definitely niches there with an aging population that might be addressable, but that's going to be harder to get at because the business cases is likely to work across the entire value chain, from the government wanting to spend less money on people in care homes and in hospitals, all the way through to people being willing to pay money to support elderly parents or grandparents. So some of those business cases might not be trivial.
But I'm just thinking, to make energy or electricity meaningful to consumers in order to engage them, we need to bundle it with, I don't know, washing machines, security products. But still, I don't really sense that, this is a business model or business case, utilities in general, let's put it this way, are willing to embrace today because, it's not really, it cannot be monetized.
I think we're addressing the wrong issue. This is a funding issue. It's all about finding a way of getting the finance industry to issue bonds that can be securitized in a way that allows consumers to go and invest money in their properties. So if I step back, we know that energy efficiency will save consumers money. So if we can find a way of allowing bonds to be raised on the market that enables those bonds to be securitized, and consumers therefore can be given access to credit in exactly the same way as commercial and industrial organizations today are entering into EPC contracts on the same basis, then you will unlock the market. And if you deliberately link those bonds to efficiency measures in the home, and you become active participants in making that happen, then you will get a market. And so this is about a financial issue around giving consumers access to money.
Okay, I think we need to wrap up. I don't know if anyone wants to give it a go on the conclusion, but I think we've it might be later on, so I'll just let Bill try to wrap up, see if he can come up with a conclusion. So thanks for listening.
Is that on? Yeah, it is. Good. Yeah, I certainly can't wrap up the whole day, I think, or the half day. It was very, very useful. I walked away with thinking about the paradigm shifts that were brought up in the presentations earlier. Moving from the bookstore to the online purchasing. The whole idea of monitoring alone, and it was brought up again on the panel, is not enough. That the control is there, needs to be there as well. And the whole holistic view of it's not just about energy management, it's not just about security. And in fact, I would raise up, Susan, you mentioned security is not as popular in some regions, and that's what our research certainly has shown, but monitoring for peace of mind is. And so that's different than professionally monitored security, and that's where perhaps a little offshoot from that can bring in some interesting relationships, especially when we start to think, who would we let into our homes to do different things? Some have talked about it being a DIY market, a do-it-yourself market, but there's many that are the do-it-for-me market. They have people take care of their landscaping, clean their homes, and et cetera, et cetera. I think the customer relationship angle was very, very interesting. The beware of averages so that you don't fall into the 8-foot hole when you're crossing the 3-foot stream on average. That stuck definitely in my mind. And monetizing the data, I think that's probably the last point that I want to make, is that talked a lot about data, and I've been working with various clients looking at business models around utilizing the data for their purposes, as well as to offer different kinds of services back to the consumers. And there's lots of possibilities there and lots of ways to do that, and I'm sure that the people on the panel, the panelists, and you out there have thought about that as well. But I definitely want to thank all of you for putting together a very stimulating day, a good way to kick off Smart Homes 2012. Please join me in thanking the speakers and panelists and moderator once again. Yeah. Remember the story about the guy who walked into the bathroom complaining about something with his mom?